The most powerful supercomputer currently is the Sunway Taiho Lite in China. But as powerful as this supercomputer really is, it's nowhere close to being powerful enough to simulate something as complex as the human brain. In 2013, a Japanese supercomputer called the K-computer, which held the title of the most powerful supercomputer in the past, attempted to simulate something close to a brain. This simulation had 1.73 billion nerve cells, and together these nerve cells formed around 10.4 trillion synapses. The process took 40 minutes, and after all of that, this only represents less than 1% of real-time human brain activity. Now let me be clear here, this is for simulating a brain. We are not comparing the information processing capability of a brain to that of a computer. Yes, you can find figures that do provide you with that comparison, but usually there are more than a few assumptions made in order to come up with these figures. It's not a straightforward case of just saying a human brain is more powerful than any supercomputer that exists today, because it's not fair to say that just because a computer like the K-computer has difficulty simulating it. You see, the K-computer consumes around this much energy at its maximum performance. However, it's unlikely that they've used all of that energy for the simulation. Let's say that they've used only 10% of that energy for this simulation of the brain that they've simulated. You're going to find out that a human brain is around this many times more efficient at being a brain than that of the simulated brain that was simulated by the K-computer. However, now the reason it's not really fair to call the K-computer an inefficient machine, or any other modern computer for that fact, is because at the very fundamental level, a human brain and a computer are functionally different. A computer has a problem simulating a human brain, that is true, but a human brain would have just as much of an issue when it comes to simulating a computer. Basically, a human brain is better at being a brain, and a computer is better at being a computer. That is, unless you change how they work at the very fundamental level. By changing the functionality of one's fundamental constituents to match the functionality of the other one's fundamental constituents, you can make one simulate the other more efficiently. For an example for how you can do this, you can take a look at a project called the NeuroGrid, which is handled by a team from Stanford University. Basically what they've done is they've built a computer using normal computing components, but they've changed how this computer works at the fundamental level. They've made transistors move away from digital logic, which a regular computer uses, to that of analog logic. And as a result, these transistors have started to function close to that of a brain's neurons. The team behind the project state that they can simulate around 1 million neurons, which together form around 1 billion synapses in real time. And they can do this 100,000 times more efficiently than a regular computer like the K-computer. Now here is what both the fundamental constituents of a brain, neurons, and the fundamental constituents of a computer, transistors, both share. They are both made of the same things everything is made of, and that is fundamental particles. Now in either case, whether it is a brain or a computer, they don't really go down all the way to the level of fundamental particles to process information. They stay at their own level of fundamental constituents, neurons and transistors. However, it's not really incorrect to say that what allows neurons and transistors to process information in the first place is in fact the interaction of fundamental particles at the very bottom level. Why am I mentioning this? It's because neurons and transistors are not exactly on the same level. As amazing as the human brain is, it took hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary and selective pressure to finally be what it is. This amazing, complex biological machine that allows, well, me to talk about how powerful it really is. The problem is we can't exactly improve our brains so that they can match the same level of improvement that computers have seen in terms of information processing capability throughout history. The information processing capability of computers has been growing exponentially throughout time, to the point where its fundamental constituents, transistors, have been becoming so small that fundamental particles themselves are starting to get in the way of information processing. There's some variation regarding how long it's expected that current normal silicon-based computing is going to last. Moore's law, the notion that the number of transistors in a specified fixed area doubles every 2 years or so, seems to be slowing down, and both big prime players in the market who manufacture processors, AMD and Intel, seem to agree. Right now, the latest processors that you can buy either from AMD or Intel have what is called a 14 nanometer process. At this kind of scale, the distances between transistors are so small you could measure them in the width of atoms. For reference, 1 nanometer is around the width of this many hydrogen atoms. The next generation of processors is going to have a 10 nanometer process. When it reaches 5 nanometers, things become very problematic. Why? Because the distances between transistors are so small that quantum mechanics start getting in the way. Fundamental particles start getting in the way, or not really getting in the way because of what I'm about to explain. At that kind of scale, quantum tunneling becomes a problem. Now, quantum tunneling does happen at larger structures, 5 nanometers or above, but at 5 nanometers or below, it becomes a bigger issue. Basically, there's a probability that an electron can pass a barrier it's not really supposed to pass. And if that happens frequently, which can happen at a structure of 5 nanometers or lower, then you will have energy leakages. And if that happens, the processor will not function properly. Here's the thing. Why don't we just use fundamental particles themselves to process information rather than relying on larger structures like transistors or neurons in the case of a human brain? Assuming we are able to control fundamental particles to process information, we probably have hit the physical limits of computing. What would a computer operating at that level be capable of? In a paper written by Seth Lloyd, a professor at MIT, he discusses what could be the ultimate physical limits to computation. Now, a disclaimer here before I move on, I am removing a lot of the assumptions, logic, and math behind what he discusses in the paper and just mentioning the main points. If you have a background in physics, computing, or even mathematics, go ahead and read the paper directly. So with that out of the way, Seth, in the paper, takes a number of physical limits that we really can't push beyond, for example, the speed of light, along with others, and applies it to computing to see what are the ultimate physical limits to computing. Now, there are different ways for computing to be limited. One of those is efficiency. Given a finite amount of energy, what is the maximum number of computing operations that you can do with this energy? The second one is memory. Given a finite amount of energy and a finite amount of space, how much information can you store with this energy in this space? The third one is speed. Given a finite amount of energy, how much can you process in as little time as possible? Now, because of Einstein's famous equation E equals mc squared, we know that matter has a lot of energy locked up within it. This papaya specifically has around this many joules of rest energy contained within it. If we were able to use all of that energy and turn this papaya into a computer using that energy, then the maximum speed at which we can make computations is around this many operations per second. Now, if we were to compare this papaya to the most powerful supercomputer that exists currently, then this papaya, if we converted all of its energy for the purposes of computing, is going to be around this many times more powerful than the most powerful supercomputer that exists currently. Now, if we wanted to use the energy contained within the papaya for information storage purposes, memory, rather than information processing purposes, then we need to turn this papaya into a plasma that's around 1 billion degrees Kelvin. For reference, the sun's core operates at around 15 million degrees Kelvin. And after we've done that, we can store around this much information. Now, you can't have the maximum speed possible and at the same time have the maximum memory possible. You need to trade off between the two. If this papaya used almost all of its energy for memory purposes, then it can only do around this many operations per second. Compare that to the earlier speed and you can see that it went down quite a bit. Now, you might think that we are far off from the physical limits of computing, but we are not that far off. In fact, there are computers that operate at the very fundamental level and use fundamental particles. You know them as quantum computers. In particular, there is a method of quantum computing called nuclear magnetic resonance quantum computing, which uses what are called the spin states of fundamental particles, which seems to be close to the physical limits of computing. Now, the reason it's not really close to the physical limits of computing is because it doesn't actually have a way of unlocking the energy contained within matter, E equals mc squared. However, that did not stop individuals from proposing ideas that can create a computer that operates at the physical limits of computing and at the same time is able to unlock the energy contained within matter. One of those ideas is mentioned in Seth's paper, and it is one of the craziest ideas you will ever hear about. If we took this papaya and squeezed it down really, really hard until it became a black hole, in theory we can use the Hawking radiation emitted by this black hole to compute things. Now, Hawking's radiation tends to speed up the less massive a black hole is. Now, because a papaya doesn't exactly have that much mass, it's only going to take around this much time for it to evaporate. And during that time, it can do around this many operations and it can store around this much information. Now you might be saying, whoa, hold on a second. Isn't Hawking radiation random? How are you supposed to make any kind of computation with something that is random? You might be correct. And it is also possible that it might not be random. Let me be clear here. There are still several big outstanding questions about the nature of Hawking radiation and what exactly happens to information that enters a black hole. And it seems we need a theory of something called quantum gravity to finally definitively answer these questions. So with that said, we have to rely on some assumptions. It is possible for you to somewhat predict in certain models the kind of radiation that will be emitted by a black hole depending on what exactly made this black hole. So in a sense, if you took something and squeezed it down into a black hole, and then took another something that exactly matches that of the first something that you squeezed down into a black hole, the radiation emitted by both black holes should be, in a sense, somewhat matched. And as a result, this allows you to make computations with a black hole's radiation. Now, ideally, you do not want to use a pre-existing black hole because the information that went into this black hole, well, you haven't really observed it. You do not know what this information is. So you will want to create a new black hole where you control the conditions of its creation. Say, like this melon here. What happened to the papaya? Someone ate it. I do have a melon though, so we will use this as an example. We squeeze this melon down into a black hole, and because we know the initial conditions that allowed this black hole to exist, we can predict what kind of radiation this black hole is going to emit. And as a result, this black hole is now essentially a computer. The question is, the real question, can it run Crisis at maximum settings? Probably not. What do you think? What is the most powerful computer possible? Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.